Assalamualaikum, alaikum everyone, and welcome to another deep dive. Today we're going to be taking a look at the spiritual benefits of fasting during Ramadan.
Yeah.
Obviously fasting is one of the 5 pillars of Islam.
Right.
So, everybody kind of has the basic understanding of it, but I think it's really interesting to kind of take a deep dive and look beyond just the kind of, surface level understanding.
Yeah, absolutely.
Right.
And,
Love it.
for me, I think the beauty of fasting is it is such a transformative experience, and
Yeah.
it really has such deep spiritual benefits that we can carry with us, not just during Ramadan, but throughout the year.
So why is it so significant, spiritually? I mean, what's so special about it?
Well, I think it's interesting. If we look at Surah Al-Baqarah, verse 2:183,
Mm-hmm.
it says, O you who have believed, decreed upon you is fasting as it was decreed upon those before you, that you may become righteous.
Right.
And so, it's interesting because, right away, it's not talking about abstaining from food and drink. It's talking about this development of self-restraint, which is something that's so...
Yeah, and it's interesting, too, because Surah Al-Baqarah, that's in the Quran.
Yes.
And, I think it's just such a powerful reminder that this is not just a physical,
Right.
thing that we're doing. It's about so much more than that.
Absolutely. And, I think, when we're so focused on kind of, fulfilling our desires, our
Yeah.
physical needs, our desires, it's easy to kind of, lose sight of our spiritual side.
Mm-hmm.
And so fasting really helps us to shift that focus and, reorient ourselves towards, a higher purpose. And it allows us to connect with Allah on a much deeper level.
I really like that because I think a lot of people talk about, Ramadan, and it's like, oh, it's the month of, giving all that. But I think a lot of people experience just being much more present
Yeah.
during Ramadan. And I think that's kind of what you're talking about.
Yeah.
Like you're so much more
Absolutely.
aware of yourself in that moment.
Yeah, absolutely. And I think, when you are fasting, you become so, acutely aware of your body's signals, like your hunger, your thirst. But you also, learn to kind of, transcend those cravings, right? And I think in that state of, heightened awareness, it allows you to appreciate even the smallest blessings.
Yeah.
Even something as simple as like a sip of water or, the company of loved ones. And, it really helps you to kind of, foster those feelings of gratitude and contentment.
Yeah, I think that's a great point. And, it's like all of a sudden during Ramadan, you can kind of like
Yes.
taste the food more. You can like,
Yeah.
everything is just like heightened. It's almost like your
Yes.
senses are heightened.
Exactly. It's like, your senses are kind of, fine-tuned, and you're able to appreciate things
Yeah.
on a deeper level. And I think also what's interesting is, it kind of goes beyond just, that personal awareness. It also helps us to develop empathy and compassion for others. You start to understand, what it means to be hungry or thirsty. And, it makes you think about all the people in the world who, experience that on a daily basis, not as a,
Right.
temporary spiritual practice,
Right.
but as a reality. And it really softens your heart and inspires you to be more generous and compassionate towards those who are less fortunate.
Yeah, it's almost like it takes you outside of yourself.
Yes.
And you start thinking about, the rest of the community, the rest of the world, and
Exactly.
people who are going through things that you're just not experiencing on a daily basis.
Exactly. And I think that leads us to, another benefit of fasting, which is, self-control, right? It's like,
Right.
you're training for a marathon. Initially, it's going to be challenging, but as you continue to push yourself, your endurance increases, right? And in the same way, with each day of fasting, our spiritual resilience also grows stronger. It helps us to, resist temptations, negative habits, and not just during Ramadan, but even after Ramadan ends. That self-control that we've developed, it kind of stays with us.
Yeah, I think that's a great point. I think a lot of people struggle with, it's like, okay, I've gone through
Yeah.
Ramadan.
Yeah.
I've done all this. I've, really strengthened my willpower. And then it's like, how do you carry that
Yeah.
over into the rest of the year?
So that's the key, right? And I think it's really about, building sustainable habits, right? So, for
Yeah.
example, if you've established a consistent prayer routine during Ramadan, trying to maintain that afterwards, The same goes for reciting the Quran or, engaging in acts of charity, right? Like these acts of worship shouldn't be confined to Ramadan.
Right.
They should become, an integral part of our lives.
Yeah, so it's like we use Ramadan as a
Exactly.
practical to kind of like
Yes.
launch ourselves.
It's like a training ground for a more spiritually fulfilling life.
Exactly. Yeah.
Right. And it's about, setting intentions and goals for yourself.
Mhm.
What do I want to achieve spiritually this Ramadan? And then using, the discipline and the awareness that we cultivate during this month to make those
Yeah.
lasting changes.
So it's not like just checking off boxes.
No.
It's like, we're trying to transform.
Absolutely. It's about transformation. It's about growth.
Yeah. So what kind of practical tips can you give people who are, listening and want to kind of deepen their faith during Ramadan? Like what can they do?
I think first and foremost, start with setting realistic goals, right? You don't have to overhaul your entire life overnight,
Right.
Maybe, you commit to reading a few verses of the Quran every day or attending a workly Islamic lecture, just spending a few moments in quiet reflection. These small, consistent steps are far more sustainable and impactful than trying to, do everything at once, right?
It's like building a foundation.
Exactly. It's about building that spiritual foundation brick by brick, right? And also, don't underestimate the power of community,
Yeah.
Join community if imnars, participate in group prayers, engage in, meaningful discussions about faith because, that sense of community, it really strengthens our spirit. It keeps us motivated and it reminds us that, this journey is not something that we have to undertake alone.
I think that's a great point too, because I've noticed that people don't really, want to talk about faith that much.
Yeah.
But during Ramadan, all of a sudden, everybody's like, oh yeah, let's talk about this. Let's get together.
Exactly.
And have these conversations. So it's like a really good.
It opens up that space for those conversations.
Yeah, absolutely.
Yeah.
So as we kind of wrap up this deep dive, is there anything else you want to leave the listeners with?
Yeah, I think, as you're going through Ramadan and experiencing, these spiritual benefits of fasting, really just take some time to reflect on how you can integrate these positive changes into your life beyond Ramadan, because Ramadan's such a special time. It's a time of spiritual renewal, a chance to reconnect with Allah and with ourselves. So, embrace this opportunity to grow and transform.
And speaking of embracing, I think it's a great time to leave everyone with a dua.
Yes.
And the dua I want to leave everyone with is, "O Allah, I fasted for your sake. I believe in you, and I put my trust in you. Forgive me, O Allah, and have mercy on me."
Ameen.
And thank you, everyone, for listening and joining us on this deep dive. We encourage you to share this with anyone who you think might enjoy it or benefit from it.
Yes.
And of course, Ramadan Mubarak to everyone.
Ramadan.